Wake up your mind. Move. Fill up your day. Oink, oink. Smart little bites that brighten your way. You're listening to Food for Thought Radio. Here at FFTradio.com. Cluck, moo, oink. Cluck, cluck. Wake up your mind. Move. Fill up your day. Oink, oink. Smart little bites that brighten your way. You're listening to Food for Thought Radio. Here at FFTradio.com. Clap, moo, oink. Food for Thought Radio. Here at FFTradio.com.
No, order, sit and leave.
This is the best political satire broadcast in the universe.
Order! I say to the honourable gentleman, give me this.
You are listening to Fockham Hall with Eric Von Essex.
Good evening and welcome to another exciting show. And we're joined by Food for Thought Radio. We're on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Holy Land Radio, Holy Land Radio FM, and anybody else I've forgotten. And we've got a packed studio tonight. Wow! We've got Survival Steve, who's on, and we've got Mark. Hello, Mark.
Evening.
And we actually, people are saying, somebody actually said in chat, I bet Elton John will tune into that when he sees the show title. Well,
he might be awake.
You never know. He might be, you know. Well, the last I heard with Elton John, I think that the front of his house is being done up, and he's only allowing selected tradesmen up his back passage of his house. Right now, before we go any further, Mark, how did you sort of get into this? I believe we'll have to give you a plug for your YouTube channel, but you're on YouTube. And so we give you a chat. But what was the first inklings that something is not quite right with what's going on?
For me, probably not that long ago. Probably late to the party, Eric. I would probably say around about 2018. I started to question things. Let's just call it, mainstream narratives, for want of a better phrase. I started just questioning that, delving into rabbit holes, as some people put it. But I would probably say that I found it somewhat entertaining. And, whether or not I believed any of the sort of conspiracy theory type stories that go around, some of which are very compelling, some of which might be true. But I started questioning things, I suppose. But I was still pretty much, lacked a certain level of awareness of the bigger picture. And then for me, like a wrecking ball moment was the 2020 shenanigans. And that really was a slap across the face with a wet fish moment. And for me, my world just came tumbling down. I think it's safe to say it was a real shock to the nervous system, quite painful and traumatic. So that's when I really, really started to question, well, everything. But you start to look beyond the conspiracy theories. You start to look into, what is it about this realm that we're in that is somewhat being hidden from us. And that's the next part of the journey for me. or that was the next part of the journey, and that should be the next part of the journey. And then you start to question all of the all of the institutions that sort of hold our minds. And coming out of that slumber was my journey. So it was very short, very quick, and very painful. And then about a couple of years ago, I came to the realization that I can't just sit around on my backside thinking that I'm more enlightened than other people, and that I've actually just got to start, putting some skin in the game, I think is the appropriate phrase. Actually doing something regardless of how stupid you might look to other people, or how uncomfortable it makes you feel, or whether or not you think you've got all of the jigsaw pieces. If you've got enough jigsaw pieces to see the bigger picture, then you have to start actually doing something. Otherwise, nothing is going to change, and the control system will just tighten its grip. So that was my very short journey to what you might call an awakening. And yeah, like I say, about 2 years ago, I came to that realization that I've got to start doing something for my own self-respect, for my own sort of conscience, and so I can look myself in the mirror, I suppose. So that's why I am where I am right now. Pretty, like I say, a pretty short, sharp journey. And my channel is called The Coop Files. That's a story. That's another story why it's called The Coop Files. But generally, it looks at why I try to break down the reasons why society actually enjoys being in a hierarchy, much like a
prison
pecking order of a chicken coop.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much my story in a nutshell.
Excellent. And we'll pop that along on a banner a little bit later, so people will be able to see it. Now, people have actually asked me, is this a Geordie Fest night, you see? But don't worry, I've got my phrase book here, so I'll be able to translate some of the words. Because I'm the only spineless bleeding southerner here, aren't I, really? With my terrible accent. But what I forgot to mention, before we go to you, Steve, is that I'd like to thank Yuki Brown, who kindly bought me a coffee. So thank you, Yuki. That was absolutely kind of you. It's really much appreciated. Thank you very much. And also, Aunt Sally mentioned something. People were saying that they, when they was typing into the chat room in YouTube, some people, their chat was disappearing. And Aunt Sally said, sometimes there's top chat there instead of live chat. So make sure that's clicked, live chat. So thanks, Aunt Sally. It's much appreciated. So there we go. Now, Steve, most people know how you got into it, but, was you walking along one day and thought, oh, bloody hell, things are not quite right? Or was it a gradual sort of, yes, something not quite right there? I mean, was it that sort of, like these sort of born again people said, it hit me when I was looking at a bowl of fruit or something like that,
Interesting point and interesting question. But in some respects, I did have I could say towards the latter part of my awakening, I had a very, very acute realization, so to speak. Almost, I don't want to say it was something mystical, but it was something absolutely mind blowing. A massive revelation in my own head. But prior to that, I mean, in general, I was always a bit of a weirdo, and I know that's not going to come as a shock to a lot of people. But I mean, my primary interest for many years, and I'm going back to like when I was, probably a teenager, was something called metaphysics. And one of the reasons I was interested in that is because I thought it sounded cool. It made me sound intelligent, even though I didn't have a clue what I was talking about. But so that got me into a lot of things about science and the nature of reality in general. So I used to study quantum mechanics and quantum theory. And again, I'm not trying to profess to be any sort of knowledgeable subject matter expert on that, but that was one of the earliest stages of my kind of dealings with how reality functions. And of course, I spent many, many years trapped in the science delusion. Now, lots of things in science are correct and accurate, but many things about that whole thing, just like a religion, keep you trapped in a mindset. But moving on, because I'll try to keep this fairly short but sweet. In about 2008, when I got more access, because bearing in mind, I mean, for some people, they might have been online or had the computer or the internet for many years. I didn't really get access to the internet and have any means to kind of plug away at it until about 2008. But one thing that was pivotal to me was I got into looking at 9/11 because I was interested in how the structures collapsed and how the fire progressed and all of that kind of thing. And none of that actually made any sense. It didn't rack up at all with science. Then that's when I got down into like the more acute conspiracy rabbit holes of 9/11. And that kind of was a massive eye opener for me. But moving, that's when I kind of got stuck into the conspiracy hamster wheel, and I just fed my mind with tons of that stuff and become massively interested. But moving on from that, I'm going to say it was about 2016 when I got into the works of Mark Passio, who you might have heard of. He runs a website called What on Earth is Happening? And that was I would say that was massively pivotal for me, because that's when I started to learn about natural law and morality and realize that, wait a minute, the conspiracy stuff, this is just keeping you in, it literally is just keeping people in a hamster wheel. There's something more aside from that, and that happens to be something called the occult, which I was kind of interested in at the time, but never really had a massive understanding of what that is until I started branching down into his work. And I think one of the reasons why his work in particular was massively impactful for me, because he's got such a very direct, you could even say almost a borderline abusive means of getting his message across. He doesn't mince his words. And again, as a soldier, I don't mind being shouted at or people name calling or anything like that. It doesn't bother me. I'm pretty thick-skinned. But that was kind of the level of force needed to get into these, into my thick skin to like, wake up, you dumbo. You need to start listening. And as Mark said in particular as well, and this is a massively important thing, and it took me quite a lot of years, by the way, action. If you've got the information and you don't do anything with it, you may as well go straight back to sleep. And this is something I try to kind of bring about to other awakened people. Is it's one thing being awake, but if you're doing nothing with it, you've basically just thrown your gold back into the gold mine. Yeah. You need to do something with it. Now, just like Mark is doing with the Coop files, he's putting information out there for others to hear and learn. It's called the alchemical great work, and it's a product of action. It's putting the truth to the ears of more and more people. So I applaud the Coop files. I think it's excellent.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Steve. Now, you notice it's okay. Down the bottom here, along the bottom, is Mark's channel, the Coop Files on YouTube. Is that all right, Mark? I'll pop that down there so people can actually see
Thank you.
Anything else you want to promote? If you've got books or anything like that, we can shove it all down there. Might as well promote, scratch each other's back, as I say. One thing, for those of you logging on to FockhamHallRadio.com, you'll be in for a surprise because the bleeding site's down. And so I've got a buggered computer and the site's and the site's down on I can't load anything up to it. That's the bad news. But the good news is that Paul English, he's going to buy a Fockham Hall, okay, and then build a website on his server. So hopefully it'll be up as Fockham Hall in the next couple of days, I hope. And I put a ticket into my provider, who provides me the place where I, build the website, uh, saying what the heck is going on. I can't load anything up, and I'm awaiting an answer. So hurry up, bargain host. No, bargain hosts are usually pretty good. They're quite good. I've been with them for about 26 years, so that's it. But now, with people generally, are you finding that they're very too comfortable? In my view, I mean, I'm just looking through what you sent me today, and if you don't mind, I'll read the list out. What you're interested in, Mark, is who do people actually think they are? Why can't people self-reflect? It's a good one. Why do people have an emotional reaction to truth or new information, known as triggering? Ego identification. What is the five sense illusion? What is the psychological force which is the master of her own mental prison? What are institutionalized belief systems? Well, the way I see it is, look at the First World War. That was an absolute marvelous piece of brainwashing and mass manipulation you could ever wish to see, to get people to go and get killed. And they called it war fever. That was the actual name, war fever. And the government even had a campaign of any man of military age dressed in civilian wear. Women went over to the man and gave him a white feather. And the poor sod could have been a merchant seaman, had seen loads of action. And a friend of mine, his father was a merchant seaman in World War II, and he'd just come back from the Atlantic convoys, sitting down in a pub, and a woman spat at him because he was in civilian uniform, civilian. She didn't know what he'd been through. Just missed torpedoes, the lot. So that's the thing. But what do you think about the government using neuro-linguistic programming, which they are using a lot? Any comments on this at all?
I think I don't know how long this has been known, that this sort of technique has been used on civilians, but it's certainly transgression against what is right. Any sort of coercion or deception is a form of, theft. It's basically stealing your free will. It's a control technique, which obviously doesn't come as any surprises given what it's called. But it's completely immoral, and therefore it fits right in with the idea of government anyway. So, but you made a reference going back to the First World War. How long have these techniques been going on, and is this just the latest version? Do we know how long this goes back to, that we can actually document that they do actually use these sorts of techniques?
I think that the World War One really started 20 years before 1914. Officially, it started at 1914, but the reason why World War One started is wrong. We've been told it's because some poor sod got killed or assassinated in Sarajevo, Prince van Ferdinand. But that is not the full truth. That's only the half truth. The real reason for World War One was Britain, and why Britain entered into it when it needn't have done, because we're an island. We got the English Channel, which is about 25, 30 miles wide. Nothing was going to attack us, and we had a navy that could have blown anything out of the water. It was a navy that dwarfed the American Navy. It's the biggest navy in the world. It's huge. So nobody would have attempted to want to invade us. But the real reason was because Germany was industrializing, and they knew that Britain ruled the waves. So they were getting oil from the Middle East via a train line via Iran, or Persia as it was known then. And the British wanted any excuse to enter into a war to destroy that train line, because they got oil from the Middle East directly on that train, and they bypassed the British shipping, who could control how much oil went into Germany. That was because they needed more and more oil as they was industrializing. Now, isn't that a strange coincidence that similar is happening today? America rules the seas, and what's happening is China and is got a railway going through Iran, and oil is being exported on this railway to Russia. Not to Russia, to other countries. And America isn't very happy about that. So there's more in it than meets the eye. But as for neuro-linguistic programming, yes, it works incredibly well. I don't know when it first started, historically, but as I said, the First World War started 20 years before 1914 in the press. And what happened is if there's any fire anywhere, it was due to German infiltrators doing it, even though it wasn't. So by the time World War I started in August 1914, the whole public was chomping at the bit to have a go at the Hun, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as it was known then. But also, the end of the First World War has been omitted from the history books. And the real reason was because the French army mutinied en masse. They refused to go over the top. They'd had enough. And the German Navy mutinied en masse and marched towards Berlin. And there's a play or film called was it Monocle Mutineer or something like that? Mm. And Britain sort of, but we're yes men in this country. Go and get killed, Smothers. Yes, certainly, sir. And we did what we're bleeding told, But it's starting to happen. And that's the real reason why World War I came to an end, because of the French army mutiny, and everybody's frightened that their army was going to mutiny, which they were doing. And it first started when they was marching past generals and that, the French, and making sheep bleating noises as they walk past. So, but as for sorry for the long expression, when neuro-linguistic programming first started, somebody in chat, I'm sure, will come up with the answer. I'm positive they will. So, sorry.
I've just spotted there in the chat. Somebody mentioned Goebbels. I think that's how you pronounce his name,
Goebbels.
Joseph
Goebbels.
Goebbels.
Goebbels, yeah.
And I had this. I actually had written down in my notes a quotation from him, which fits in nicely with your war propaganda. So the quote is, "The essence of propaganda consists in winning people over to an idea so sincerely and so vitally that in the end they succumb to it utterly and can never escape from it." Yeah. And it's that never escape from it. If you really think about what he said there, it just resonates with, what he said about people spitting on people in civilian clothes. I mean, that's how much they have sincerely and vitally succumbed to whatever it is being programmed to believe. So that's quite a synchronicity there.
Well, that's right. I mean, how the Allies won World War II, yes, it was American industrial might, because for every one tank that the Germans could build, the Americans could build 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We didn't worry about the losses of tanks, couldn't care less, because we could supply thousands of them. It's the same with the USSR. But the other way is our propaganda bullshit was better than better than the German propaganda bullshit. We were very, very, very good. We are world leaders in bullshit, this country. And I think it's Sefton Delmer who said after that war, and I can't remember it verbatim, this is off the top of my head, it was something like propaganda is like a newly, a neat English garden. We must stop the weeds of truth coming through. Or a neat English lawn, that was it. We must stop the weeds of truth coming through. Sums you up. Sums it up. And we are very good at it. Very, very good, this country. That's how we win things.
Someone's just pointed out as well, Eric, in the chat, which is a
Yeah.
very good point, that like most things, or probably like everything, NLP can be used for good or bad.
Yeah.
So in the context of government, they could use it for good.
Mm.
They do have that ability. They do have that choice.
Mm.
But yeah, I just thought that was an important point.
But it is used for good. I mean, people that are suffering from things like shell shock and trauma, NLP works well, and it has helped people. But the trouble is, everything's a double-edged sword. It can be used for good, or it can be used for bad. Look at a gun. A gun can be used for good or bad. It just depends on whose hands it's in. And that's it.
Yeah.
A gun doesn't
kind
kill
of-
people. People kill people, not guns.
That's a
Sorry, mate.
brilliant way to kind of introduce the word occult, which I know many members of this chat and your podcast will know, even if it's just from myself who's mentioned, the word occult means hidden. And just as NLP can be used for, you could say, good or bad purposes, the occult can also be used for good and bad purposes. Bearing in mind, the occult is simply, well, there's two aspects to it, but one primary aspect, I say primary aspect, both aspects are kind of equally as important, and they both mirror each other's kind of understanding. But one aspect relates to the laws of nature. And when I talk about natural law, well, these are the laws inherent to the nature of the universe. So these things can't be changed. It doesn't matter who doesn't want to believe it or who doesn't accept it. It doesn't matter. It's still going to exist regardless of that, because it's fixed in nature, can never be destroyed, it can never be altered. But also on that, the second aspect of what's known as the occult, which is a body of science related to spiritual and mental laws of nature. Well, one of these aspects is human psychology. So when you mention NLP is just a modern form of you could say alchemy, because alchemy is a process of shaping the mind, and that can be shaped for good or bad purposes depending on the programming one was to receive. So government, and again, I'm sure most people understand this from the times I've mentioned it in chat, the word government, gubernare mentis, means mind control, because that's how they work. When the mind control fails to function, what they do is to rely upon more on force. So now that, and this is one thing that we can take from a battle perspective, what can we anticipate in the future? Well, because more and more people are becoming more acutely aware of the mind control, the propaganda, the NLP, the various social programming, which in its present form, to use a military slogan, is known as cognitive warfare, because it cognitively affects people. So what they will then do is they'll have to rely upon force. So for the New Agers and the hippies out there, and again, I'm not trying to be derogatory here, but anyone who thinks that if we just ignore this problem, it will go away, or if we just show them some love, it'll go away. No. Change your flip-flops for steel-toe cap boots. Go and arm yourself with whatever you can muster up in your own mind as to what's going to be acceptable for when things get worse. So when things get worse, for one, I'm not going to just sit and watch my fellow men, women, and children in my society, in my nation, in my community, be brutalized by the imbeciles called cops and the imbeciles called soldiers, because that's what will happen if we show weakness.
Well, we've got an example of that. Thanks for leading us in. In 1985, there was something called the Battle of the Beanfield. I didn't know anything about it, and I was alive in 1985, so I knew, I was an adult then, and until somebody told me about it, and I'll just show, if that's okay with you, a little bit from it. What it was, we used to have New Age travellers, and these New Age travellers were quite peaceful people, hippies in many ways, and they used to drive around in old vehicles, and they went down to Salisbury Plain, and the police herded them into a field, and they went doolally, the police, and these people were quite peaceful, and they were beating people and injuring them, and news cameramen, it was censored, and I think it's only recently been released, this film, and this is just a very, very small aspect from it. I'll just bring this up on the screen, just one moment. I'll just right, and I'll just bring this here, and here it is.
Have seen in the last 30 minutes here on this field has been some of the most brutal police treatment of people that I've witnessed in my entire career as a journalist. There must be an inquiry. I don't know what the results will be of it, but at this stage, the number of people who've been hit by policemen, who've been clubbed whilst holding babies in their arms and in coaches around this field is still to be counted. What the end result will be, we don't know, but there must surely be an inquiry after what's happened here today.
I became involved because I was a reporter on duty on the weekend, on the Saturday, when my news desk had some sort of prior notice that despite the injunction being taken out by, I think, English Heritage and the National Trust, preventing the convoy from gathering at Stonehenge, that they were likely to proceed down there. So I was asked by my news editor to go with a camera crew down to Stonehenge or try and tag along with the convoy before it got to Stonehenge and see what materialised. We got to the Park House roundabout and left our car there and then walked up. I mean, we saw some of the preliminary skirmishes with the police before we walked up to be told by the police that we could go no further. And that's when we took a decision to come back, walk slightly back away from the police roadblock and climb over a barbed wire fence and up the side of the bean field to get into the field itself.
There's no window in this truck. What happened to it?
The police smashed it.
Where?
As we were trying to, at the top now, when we were trying to cross the field.
We were also rammed on both sides.
Yeah. Police car rammed us on that side, and then there was a few of them stood around this side and smashed the window.
Was there no provocation? Why did they smash the window?
Because we were trying to get into
go through.
And they didn't want to let you come through?
They wouldn't let us down the road. They blocked the road. So we pulled onto here. There's nothing else we could do. We couldn't stop there.
Has anybody been hurt?
Nothing serious. I don't know.
Will you just take care of him for a moment? We've got a broken arm. You come with me.
Well, that is what, it goes on a long time. But if you go onto YouTube and put Battle of the Beanfield, you will see the police with their truncheons. There was a pregnant woman and they were beating hell out of her. There. You see this woman being dragged out of a coach and she's pregnant and they're beating her with a truncheon. They went absolutely ballistic. And I thought that highly trained people would behave like that. But I don't know. Steve, have you ever noticed anything like that? I mean, I know you've got to be careful what you say, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're highly trained. You do what you're trained to do, surely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would just basically add to that. Yeah, I've been arrested for real several times. I've also been arrested in training exercises several times. And the mindset, I mean, I'm not trying to slaughter all cops here because that would be easy. I mean, I could quite easily say they're all a bunch of imbecile psychopath lunatics, which they are, but that's not really getting us any further forward. But if we were to address that with facts, well, yeah, I mean, I work with cops quite a lot. Loads of them are decent blokes at a barbecue or the pub. But when it comes to work, once they put the uniform on, they think they're one below God. So when it comes to a civvy, and that's how they'll address them. I mean, I don't know what they call them nowadays, but civvies are just there to be truncheon fodder. Not for all of them. I'm not saying they're all absolutely deranged, psychotics, maniacs, but many of them are. I knew many of them. Many of them would say to me, "It's great on a Friday night. We get to smash heads in with truncheons." This is an attitude, and I would actually say that out of from being a soldier, even though really on paper we were absolute animals killing people for money, just because the government decided that a certain group of people didn't deserve to live anymore. I mean, you don't get any more retarded than that. But moving aside, if I was to say, well, who was worse between the attitude of the cops and the attitude of soldiers? I would by far say the attitude of cops was worse than what I saw with soldiers. And I'm not trying to belittle that at all, because
You're hardly
fundamentally,
trained.
well, highly trained to
You were
kill
highly-
or
That's
hurt
right.
people, or highly trained in terms of the cops is to remove people of their fundamental rights. And I think this is why Mark's point earlier is, I mean, I forget how it was worded exactly, but who are we and who do we think we are? Well, if I was to caveat that by saying, well, do we own our own bodies, and does anybody have the moral capacity to tell us otherwise? Well, the answer to that is yes, we own our own bodies, but because the government, which means mind control, own our own minds, and we've become, through society and indoctrination, have become absolutely brainwashed into a religious death cult known as government, we then become property ownership of the government. And again, if you're getting paid to do a job, you switch off even more to what the government or what morality means, and then you just abide by what the government tell you to do. It's known as moral relativism, and pretty much every single, in fact, I say pretty much, without a shadow of a doubt, anybody who wears uniform in the police or the military is a moral relativist. Bearing in mind, this is one of the tenets of Satanism. So all cops, all soldiers are de facto Satanists, and they need to know this. And then the only way they're going to know that is by more and more people tuning into what morality means, what natural law means, and ultimately what the occult means. And this is why, I encourage people to watch the likes of Mark Barr and the Coop Files, and also somebody put it in chat, somebody called River Laurie. River Laurie does excellent commentaries on the occult, and this is a kind of people we need to be tuning into and listening to and gaining this moral education. So I don't know if that answers your point, but cops, big fat 0 from me.
Excellent point. And actually, Mark, just please excuse me. You died to speak. Please excuse me, because when people put things in capital letters, it's a question, or they want it, to stand out. And thank you very much, because it helps me as I'm looking through chat. It's in capital letters. And Alice Gorgeous said, "I will never accept this level of pain and suffering as normal." Well, that's excellent. Also, we've had a poll on Telegram, and it's still open, and you can go on to Fockham Hall, the Telegram channel. The link is down below, and again, it's not in my crutch, it's down in the description below here. And you go there and you can vote. It'll be open for a week or so you can vote whatever you want. And I think we've all seen it. We'll show it when 3 of us agree, shall we? Okay, right. So over to you, Mark. I'm sorry, mate, to keep you waiting for so long.
No, that's fine. Absolutely fine. Just again, really just agreeing with everything Steve has just said and putting, I suppose, my spin on it. I suppose you mentioned the words or the phrase there, Eric, about these cops being highly trained. And obviously the bit that stood out in that video.
No, not the cops being highly trained, but the army trained. I'm not sure about the cops.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would use the word, they are highly programmed. The bit that stood out in that video was obviously the brutal treatment of a pregnant woman or a woman with babies. I mean, you have to be severely brainwashed and programmed to carry out that sort of behavior, regardless, of the size of your paycheck. And, I completely agree with what Steve says about moral relativism. That's what breeds this type of behavior, is the idea that the government make up what's right and what's wrong. They follow those orders, and then they abdicate their responsibility for doing the right thing. And they believe that because there are no consequences for them, immediate consequences, and they still get their paycheck, they think that is the right behavior. But this is the prison that they are creating, and the removal of rights, and they are the people who actually carry out those orders and actually take the rights away from us. They are creating the prison for themselves and for their own children. I mean, how many people have you heard say that? This is what people couldn't understand about the 2020 situation. The fact that the police were treating us errants as scum, as something beneath them. And
Superior, they were a superiority attitude, wasn't it? And
absolutely.
Excuse me coming in here, rudely interrupting. I'm terribly sorry. Mark Anthony's come up with a good one here. Never forget the government's own behavioural insights team were using NLP, neuro-linguistic programming techniques, not for nefarious reasons. Were using NLP techniques for nefarious reasons during the 2020 pandemic.
Yeah, and that's another good point. The Behavioural Insights team, I think they were called the Nudge Unit before that. And I think they had to change that name because it sounded a bit too nefarious. Behavioural Insights sounds much more benevolent. And I think it goes back to a document called Mindspace as well. Have you heard of the Mindspace document? I think that goes back to 2010. That's an interesting document commissioned by the government. And I can't obviously regurgitate the contents of that document, but it's the idea that they fill the space of your mind with whatever they want to program it with. And the interesting thing about that document is that they actually admit that these techniques would be somewhat I can't remember the word that they use, but immoral, somewhat questionable, unethical. If the public were to come to the realization of what's being done with them, it might raise serious questions. So they were well aware of, how unethical this behavior is, but they went ahead and did it anyway. No surprises. And just to quickly go back to what Steve was saying about moral relativism, just a personal anecdote, which I often like to do on my channel. So the idea that the cops can carry out orders of somebody that they perceive with authority and moral understanding, and they abdicate their responsibility, it is somewhat a very childish mentality. It is somewhat immature.
Yes.
That's definitely, there's definitely truth to that. And it reminded me of a situation I found myself in when I was probably about 17 years old. I think I definitely always have had a particular dislike for authority. So I think the awakening was always in me. But yeah, so back when I was 17, so we're talking 33 years ago. And I remember I had my first car, which was a nice gold Ford Capri. And I was stopping at my local paper shop for the latest edition of Max Power, Essential Reading. And I pulled over on the double yellow lines just to nip into the shop, pick up the magazine, got back in my car, and there was a policeman just about to give us a ticket. So I did what everybody should do and quickly drove away. Drove home, was living at my parents', and the policeman obviously turned up, found out my address, turned up. And let's just say when he was at the door and he was obviously trying to give us this ticket or whatever it was at the time, and my mum was there, and I was arguing with the policeman. And I think the main reason was because he was just a bit of an arse. during the actual scene. Anyway, long story short, I kid you not, when my mum wasn't looking at him and was looking at me, the policeman was doing this.
Good heavens.
And I was 17 years old, and I could not believe what I was seeing. And it was just
childish.
It was obviously to get a rise out of me, but surely a middle-aged, mature authority figure versus a 17-year-old boy racer. And that is kids cop.
You're right.
And this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with effectively children in grown-ups uniforms.
Spot right on. I mean, Mike Mantis says, is it because they think they're untouchable? I think it probably is. Yeah. But really, I mean, I've actually seen, I was in a situation where there was a time, when was it? About 10, no, longer than that, about 20 years ago, when farmers used to burn off their fields. And it was a really long, hot summer. And one of the fields had got out of hand near Stevenage. It was between Stevenage and Nebworth. And this field was flaring up. So I went past the field and then drove, when I was in a safe sort of area, drove into Nebworth, parked my car up round the side turn, and I thought I'd take a picture of it. You know, it's quite a picture, you see. So I got out of my car and I thought, hang on about. Smoke's getting a little bit thick here. No, I'm not going to take a picture. I'm legging it. I'm getting out. So I drove down the bottom of this turning, and there's a copper there directing me towards the fire. So I went round him, and he was bashed on the top roof of my car. So I stuck two fingers up at him, because if I'd have gone towards the fire, I'd have just been a singed car, or it'd have blown. God knows what had happened. What a nutter! What a nutter! I ignored it to save me, and this is the stupidity of it. That what I was going to say. I follow a character on YouTube. I mentioned him last night, called the Transient Kiwi, and he's a homeless man who's made something of his life, and he's on YouTube. He gets his money from YouTube for what people send him, and he's cycled all the way down through France, and he's reached Barcelona. Now there he is with his bike. He's got shorts on, t-shirt, all the, his pike is fully laden because he's got his tent and his living stuff. And he gets stopped by two police with dark glasses. And they're speaking Spanish. He says, I'm sorry, I don't, he's got a New Zealand accent, but his parents are English and what he was doing in England, I don't know. But he said, sorry, mate, sorry. He said, I don't understand you. I can't speak Spanish. What do you want? And they go, no, they get, I think his passport, so take a picture of it. He said, well, what have I done wrong? And they just walked away. One of them said in broken English, have a nice day, and walked off. But they're all sort of, like the 1950s teddy boys, look at me, I've got a uniform on, dark glasses, but dark glasses that are mirrored glasses. And isn't that one of the first lessons they say? Always show your eyes when you're talking to the public or talking to anybody, because if you shield your eyes, it upsets people. It makes them uneasy. You've got to show your eyes. You know what I mean? So, that's my 10 pence worth. But chat tonight, my words. Steve, that's a good one that you put there. That's fantastic.
Well, that's worth, at some stage, that's worth kind of just having a little bit of paying some lip service towards that, because as I've said in the bottom, our entire society has been inculcated into the ideologies of a religion known as Satanism. So if anyone is wondering why the world sucks, well, that's why. So this is the sucking force. Why does the world suck? Why? Because practically the entire world believes in the ideologies, the core principles of Satanism. So that's worth dissecting. Some of those words might be new to some people, but is it worth doing that now? Selfishness is a pretty obvious one.
I agree with you.
Yeah, but you probably noticed that society has been managed to degrade over considerably since probably past my generation in the late 60s 70s. Things have rapidly went downhill to the time we're in now. The average youngster is probably completely and utterly savaged by mind control into becoming selfish in their attitudes towards various things. That doesn't just necessarily mean selfish to oneself, but it also means selfish to one's group, one's societal or even organization. So the police, for example, they'll be selfish to the cause of the police. The government will be selfish to their own cause, and they'll not consider humanity as a whole. That in itself is what's known as chaos sorcery, when you don't give a crap about the humanity as a whole. Well, the opposite of not giving a crap about the rest of the world is selfishness. It's all about service to one's own cause or one's own group. But moving on from that, moral relativism, I think we've kind of mentioned that. It's, well, I don't need to think about morality because I've been given a job to do, is a kind of easy example. So the cops, the soldiers, well, the government told me it's okay to go and kill those people, so it's got nothing to do with me. Well, yeah, actually, the rules of morality, the laws fundamental to the universe don't just change just because somebody with a sticker with the Queen's face on it said you can do these things. That doesn't exist. This doesn't, and this is why natural law is so massively important, because when people put the decrees from their queen or from their king or from their government before they put the fundamental laws of nature first, well, the universe is going to fold inwardly, because we've managed to screw up the operating program to the point where we're going to have a major system malfunction. Moving on from that, social Darwinism is literally about not realizing that all men and women are created equal. Therefore, we put certain people on pedestals, such as the king, the queen. What's he called? What's the prime minister called?
Queer Starmer.
Some people put him on a pedestal. I don't know why, but they will. But regardless, they'll still equate these people of having more rights than anybody else. That doesn't exist in nature. This is why it's so important to realize that we own our own bodies and nobody has any more rights above and beyond what every single other individual in the world has. Therefore, nobody's got the power of authority to tell them to do otherwise. That can only be met with force or mind control, all of which are acts of violence or coercion, which are transgressions of natural law. But the last one is eugenics. And if anyone's not familiar with eugenics, well, basically the whole of the medical pantomime that went on from 2020 onwards was a mass eugenics operation, i.e., who do we not want on this world? Well, 6 billion people. And what we're going to do about it, we're going to pop some poison into their bloodstream. That's what eugenics is. This is what society are following because they haven't become to understand their own self-worth. They haven't reached a level of autonomy, and they don't understand their rights and freedoms to sufficient extent. That's why the world's in chaos.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And I've been talking about things such as demonic. Jerry Malwinski, I'm in contact with Jerry, and there's Helen, and I'm hoping to do a show with both of them. Gentlemen, you're welcome in the studio. Obviously, we can only have we can only have 2 or 3 people with the cameras on. But you could do a Patrick and Anorak, they sort of say in the background and come in with comments. But it's going to be a full program. You know, he hasn't got back to me yet, Jerry, but I'm sure he will, because he's been on the show before. And I've noticed what you were saying about the NHS. I noticed that in a comment a little bit later on. I mean, they're coming in thick and fast, and please excuse me if I don't read all your comments out. I just can't. It's impossible. I'll try. Again, capital letters, please. It helps me to focus in on them. DJB2 says the behavioural insights team are sinister. Yes. UK Column did a presentation on that. Oh, yes. And what about that? where is it now? There's a psychiatrist place down in London somewhere. No, it's not the Tavistock Centre. It's the Hampstead something or other. I don't know. But they're sort of advising children of 7 or 8 years old of a sex change and things like that. I mean, these people are sick, you know.
That falls under eugenics as well, believe it or not, Eric.
Yeah.
You know, when they're doing various medical things in order to change how society functions, this is all part and parcel of what eugenics is. And again, if we're funding and supporting these immoral pieces of human excrement, then really we're no better. We've got to be better than that, and we've got to pull ourselves out of this mind control, come out of the death cult religion called government, and become self-governable. And we need to encourage the rest of society to reach the mindset required in order to be able to do this and step outside of the programming.
Oh, you're right. Now, so I was going to say, Six Ways. Hang on a minute, that's you, Steve, isn't it? I thought he's come up with a bloody good one. That's right, because it doesn't say Steve. I thought he's come up with a bloody good one there. But you're all coming up with good ones. Natural law is essential and unbreakable. It is happening now. Oh, actually, you should read it as your comment.
Should I elaborate on that? That was in answer to somebody. I forgot who it was, but it was about again, excuse me if I've not read this or seen it correctly, but it was along the lines of how long does natural law take? Well, natural law it's happening all the time. We're seeing the consequences of human behavior every time we switch on the TV, every time we look out the window, every time we wake up in the morning. We are receiving the consequences of our actions upon the world and receiving them in the product of nature, which is either the consequential requirements of either negative or positive behavior. So if we're aligned to satanic ideology, for example, well, the world's going to be in chaos, suffering, pain, misery, trauma, enslavement, until we change our behaviors to align ourselves with how nature functions. Nature doesn't care if we want to be imbeciles and just act like lunatics and create chaos for ourselves. Self-induced suffering, that's what natural law is. If we don't want self-induced suffering, well, something's got to give, and nature's not going to give. It's only human behavior that's going to give. And if we don't align ourselves to care, compassion, generosity, everything opposite to how Satanism functions, then we're going to suffer as a result. So we need to change our behaviors if we want to change the world.
Excellent. Now, as it's coming up to 9 o'clock, we now have an advert break, and so stand by, everybody. Here is an advert. Here it comes. Hello. Are you suffering from severe constipation? Well, your problems are over with the Fockham Hall Alfonso restaurant. Yes, Alfonso restaurant, guaranteed hygiene free. I'd like the chef surprise, please. What does that consist of? Well, it's the surprise because the chef dropped his hemorrhoid cream in the curry. I think I got the shits already. Yes, come to the Alfonso restaurant in Fockham Hall for all your constipation problems. You'll be on the bog for at least a week after visiting that restaurant. Thank you. There we go. So we do like to promote, local business. So there it is. Sorry. We have to have a bit of toilet humor, don't we? Right. Now, we got so many in chat. Hang on. We got something here in. What on earth is this? We got Ian Armitage. He's written something in. I don't know what it is. What's this writing? What do you think that is? It's Hebrew, isn't it?
You're on mute.
You're on mute. Right.
Sorry about that. Can I quickly backtrack? Somebody, that language looked like Hebrew. If it's not, and I've offended somebody, I do apologise. But that's what it looked like.
It looks like Hebrew, doesn't it? I don't know what it says.
It's rude. There's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Now that's very important. That's a very important number. It's known as the master builder. So when I talk about occult stuff, the occult also talks about a hidden symbology, hidden language, hidden things that a lot of people don't have an idea about. So the number 22 actually represents something called the master builder. And what you could kind of deduce from that is that number is the symbolic number that puts dreams into reality. This is why you see 22 players on a football pitch. It's why you see 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. It's why you've got 22 bones in the human skull. It's why you've got 22 cards in the major arcana. It's, this goes, the 22 fallen angels. Why? Because this is massively important in occult terms. And, a lot of people, I think, watching will be familiar with the number 33, which is the master teacher. All of these things have got significance. And whether we, outside of the sphere or the understanding of the occult, believe it or not, or accept it or not, don't accept it, these other people do, and the people running the ship do, and they know this stuff. They use it all the time, and this is why we are at a psychological advantage, because they know and we don't, and we need to change that dynamic.
Well, Ian Armitage, thank you for your message, but we can't read it. I hope it's not rude. And if you could do it in English, please, because the majority of people watching this speak English. Now, Mark, over to yourself, mate.
Just to pick up on a couple of points that Steve's already made there. The question about natural law, how long does it take? And I didn't see the question, Steve, so I'm just going from what you said there. Obviously, absolutely agree with what you've said there. It's there. It always has been. It always will be. But I'm wondering whether the question was relating to how long does it take to have an effect, from the cause to the effect. If that was sort of where the person who posted the question was coming from, it's obviously it's a complex area. It's Steve can break it down and make it sound really, really simple, and at a certain level, it is very, very simple. Treat others the way you would want to be treated yourself. You have the right to do anything as long as your choices don't impede on somebody else's rights to make their choices. End of story. Good night. Turn the show off. It really is that simple. Yeah. But obviously, you can study this and you can research it probably, 20 lifetimes over. There's always something to learn. But from a really, really sort of micro level, from, Steve mentioned about his interest in quantum physics and those types of subjects. And I'm certainly not going to profess to be any sort of expert, but, these are areas which are worth delving into. And at that sort of micro level, that quantum level, natural law happens instantly. This can be seen through the observer effect. If people aren't familiar with the observer effect, definitely look that up, do a bit of research. Very, very, very interesting discoveries about the nature of reality. So at a micro level, it's instant, but at a huge macro level, when you've got 6-7 billion people all putting their thoughts into action, it's not just going to happen instantly. You're not, if you do the wrong thing, you're not going to walk under some scaffolding and something drops on your head the same day. It's not going to work like that. It's going to be a gradual process. And a lot of it happens through consciousness, just like the observer effect. Consciousness trumps matter, and our consciousness puts into effect the reality that we generate through our level of consciousness. It is very sort of deep, I suppose, esoteric, occulted. But if that was kind of where the person who asked the question was coming from, how long does it take? It's instant at the micro level. and it takes obviously a lot longer at the macro level. So I just wanted to add that into what Steve had said there. And then again, a comment, just picking up on a comment that was in the chat a while ago, normalized suffering. I can't remember exactly what it was verbatim. I'm not going to accept this level of suffering as normal. And again, this is where people are at. You mentioned people being comfortable, Eric, at the beginning of the show. And this is where they're at. They're comfortable with this level of suffering. It's become normalized. It's like the boiling the frog analogy, isn't it? The water is now bubbling and they're happy. As Huxley once said, people will become, they will actually enjoy their servitude. And that is where we're at.
It's spot on. And it's a bit like a chap goes in the lunatic asylum and there's a fellow there bashing his head against the wall. And he said, "What are you doing that for?" He said, "Well, it's nice when it stops." And I think we've got a similar sort of situation, haven't we, really? But what got me during the lockdown, I was the only one, I don't want to sound smug or anything like that, walking around in a big and great supermarket, which is quite a big supermarket, Brookville Farm in Cheshunt, and I was the only one not wearing a mask. And, it shocked me how people obeyed so much. And I guess it was similar for you folks, because I think I only saw about 2 or 3 people not wearing a mask throughout the lockdown.
Yeah. I think I annoyed quite a lot of people, especially shop owners.
I actually fake deafness. So, "Pardon, can you come a bit closer? I can't hear you." "Pardon," and then deliberately misinterpret what they're saying. "You want to look at my what? Sorry?" Seriously, piss off.
I had death threats from 16-year-old shelf stackers. That's how. I swear to God,
really,
there was several shops. I'll not mention the names of them. I don't want to. But I did actually send in a letter before claim to the chief executive of Asda, incidentally. I never got a penny, by the way, but I sent a letter in threatening to sue over the abysmal, abhorrent treatment of their blinking, absolutely ridiculous members of staff. But there was shelf stackers threatening to kick me in. I had death threats from one group. It was absolutely berserk. I thought I used to do this for a job, kill people. So you want to tangle? Come on, let's have some.
And let's face it, Steve. I mean, you're pretty fit. I mean, and I mean, it turned people into sort of mini dictators. But the one I used to say, "Have you got a mask? Have you got a mask?" I said, "I'm terribly sorry, I don't sell them. Try eBay."
Yeah.
Sort of,
Ultimately, I mean, I was quite rude to people at times, but I did fundamentally understand that what it is that basically they've got mental schisms going on in their heads. They can't process critical information. They're not thinking from the limbic system, from the neocortex or prefrontal lobes, the higher mind or the human mind. They're thinking from the animal mind, from the limbic system. That's why they come up with these animalistic fight or flight type tendencies. This is why, spotty teenagers was threatening to kick 2 shades of dog's turd out of me, because all they can think is there's a nasty virus and we're going to die, and the government give us strict instructions to obey, and that they can't process beyond that. So basically, you've got a bunch of blinking buffoons who are I say buffoons. I like to use the word buffoons, but technically you could say secondary psychopaths who are just basically they've become the house slaves of chattel slavery. They're basically forcing people to obey because the masters give them a "come on, Rover, do as you're told, and you'll get a bone." And that's what they've got going on in there. Actually, Mark does a fantastic presentation on this. I've seen a couple of your podcasts where you talk about the human mind, the dynamics of how the human brain works and how it needs to be balanced. And that's what the occult is. It's about balancing the mind so we become immune to psychological assault.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, Eric,
So if I can just come in,
sorry.
Ian mentions, says, "Is the translator I found works?" Yes, it is. Okay, sorry, mate. Carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to, again, just give a little bit of my experience about that period of the mask wearing. I love the phrase, put your mask on, and I would just say, well, I haven't got one. It's like, it was just assumed that you had one. But anyway, I think, the idea that you give somebody an epaulette and it goes to their head, you give them a sense of authority. Sometimes it's just an luminous jacket, isn't it? An luminous vest, and they think they can push you around and dictate to you. And this was, I believe this is, the sort of the main, insights that was gained from is it the Stanford prison experiment, where they allowed the prisoners to be the wardens and they swapped roles. It's been a while since I've watched that, but I'm pretty sure that was the principle. You treat people like prisoners, you treat them like slaves, but then you give them authority and they become even more tyrannical than the way that they were treated.
Yeah.
It's like a survival instinct, I guess. If you're suffering from trauma, you will take on the role of either the victim or the abuser for survival purposes. And that's what that whole period felt like to me, was just lost children who are happy to, once they're given a sense of authority, it goes to their head and they think they can use that authority to push other people around who aren't complying. And just like what somebody said about the police, they think they're untouchable. Because they had authority on their side, they thought they were untouchable. And you couldn't reason with that. You can't reason with unreasonable people.
Well, they go into robot talk, police. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, I was a long time ago. This is in Yorkshire. I can't remember the full, but some bloke lived in a very remote cottage, and he had lots of land, and he built a building on it that the council, and it wasn't bothering anybody. He didn't look out of wick, and the council came along and said he's got to tear it down because it was against the planning regulations. And this bloke, he put his heart and soul into this building, and they filmed it. And a council official came along and he's going, under regulation, blah, 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 blah. He said, I don't care about that. Got his gun up and he said, if you step 1 foot on my land, I'll shoot you. So this council said, well, under regulation, blah, 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 blah. And the council bloke stepped on his land and he went, he killed him. And when I went to work, everybody at work was cheering. Hey, good for that bloke. Let's help him. Let's pay him. He said it's a pity you couldn't have bagged a couple of the bastards at the same time. He's all joking, of course. It's not right to kill a council official, but he asked for it because the chap said, "If you step 1 foot on my land, I'll shoot you," and he did. So he shot him, and he did warn him, and in that sense. This sounds a bit weird. That man was protecting his own land, and he gave the man a warning. If he didn't give him a warning, that wouldn't have been fair. But he did tell him very clearly, "Do not step foot on my land, or I will shoot you." And that was it, But was this DJB too? So, I do not carry a Sharpie. I'd be in jail if I used one. Yeah, so you're going to say, Mark? Sorry, mate.
I was just to finish off the mask sort of topic, Eric. Again, anecdote. I've told this story before. Our daughter was 11 during that period. She was just turning 11, and she was going to secondary school. Huge transition, as you can imagine, in a 2-tier system. And just as she was starting secondary school, they brought the mask rules back in, what have you. She was an 11-year-old and she went to school and she just stood up to the teachers and said, no, these are perceived, figures of authority. They have total control over children's minds. And an 11-year-old girl went to school and said no. And
wow,
that, and it's not because she is, you know, a rebel, so to speak. She's a good girl. She knows the difference between right and wrong. She's very bright. She won't do things just to be, you know, just to be a rebel. She knew it was wrong, and she stood up. She had the courage to say no and act in accordance with natural law. No, I have the right not to do that. You don't have the right to force me, which is really all it comes down to, apart from the fact it was all nonsense anyway. But yeah, 11-year-old. And the teacher's reaction, because she was using reason to argue, they couldn't argue back, and they just left her alone. It was as easy as that. And she actually grew. She grew in confidence because of that.
Oh.
Can you imagine what an 11-year-old is
For
feeling?
11-year-old,
She's getting on the school bus for the first day, going from a tiny primary school with 6 people in her year group to a huge secondary school where she knows nobody. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget it. Obviously, I'm biased, but
daughter to be proud of. And Alice Gould just said, my mother broke lockdown and got a standing ovation in a coffee shop. Well, I don't know where you are, because we wouldn't do that where I bleed and live. Yeah.
Can I just mention about Mark's daughter, if you don't mind? It says it's an amazing story, and it's a really encouraging one for this is where the rest of society need to be. They need to follow the principles that your daughter employed there. And if you were to put that into occult terms, I mean, you mentioned your daughter knew it was wrong. She had the courage to act. So this is basically, that's the trivium process. She's understood objective morality. She knows the difference between right and wrong. And she's had the courage to act on her conviction and put that conviction into action. This is how reality is formulated. So if we can formulate reality, the reality that we perceive with more people having the courage of their conviction because they understand right from wrong, game over. Just like Mark said earlier, that's the end of the show. We can go home. We can all get tea and medals because that's how it's done. You put the truth into action. Simple.
Yeah, good point. Should we go and have a look at the poll and see where it's got up to in the Telegram channel? And before we do, Exo says, what is it? Try everything at least twice, but moon ye not if it backfires. It's my motto from a teenager. Right, let's go and have a look. Where we got at the poll. If I can find the bloody thing, where is it? Here it is. I think that's the poll. Let's share the screen. Can we see that on the screen? Can you see the poll on the screen? And if you can't, I'm reading it out. And I put the poll was governments, democratic and dictatorship alike, have killed more of the people they're supposed to represent than all the wars put together. Therefore, do we need government? The question, right? I'm going to just read the questions and tell you what percentage it got. Okay. Top one was hang on, no, I'll do it by percentage. Right, top of the list was bottom of the list. Oh, hang on, I'll read it from the top. Right, it's too confusing. Yes, we do need fully democratic government to keep law and order. That got how many votes? 0. Now, I think I can guess what you voted for, Steve. It says, no, we don't need government. People need to be self-reliant. That got 60% of the votes. Then to go from government to no government would need an interim process. That got 10% of the votes. The end of usury will see the end of government. That got 10% of the votes. A spiritual awakening will solve things. That got 0. Democracy is the only answer. That got 0. Democracy is a usury misdirection. That got 0. Trusting God, 5%. Now, I've been trying not to laugh at the next one. Trusting Trump, 5%. Yes, will that person own up? And then we got none of the above. I have a better suggestion for the show chat room. So there we go. That got 20%. So that's 20% of people in the chat who. So please put it in block capitals what your better suggestion is, and I will try and read it out. So there we go. I've got to find my way back there. There we go. So that is, but trusting Trump, that got 5%. So come on, who's going to own up? Come on, own up now.
Definitely wasn't me. I mean,
it wasn't me.
You're quite correct in your assumptions, Eric. I voted for the we don't need government, as you might have guessed.
And I voted that. But
yeah.
You don't have to say. You don't have to say what you voted for, but
Oh, I've got nothing to hide. However, there was another thing on that poll that I was. I mean, I didn't. I mean, I don't think you can vote for two different things, but a spiritual awakening. Now, the reason I mention that is because a spiritual awakening is, well, we need to know what that is. Well, spirituality is a measure of freedom. So if we class ourselves as spiritual beings, which I'm guessing most, if not all, the people tuning in would want to, and rightfully deserve that accolade. We want to be free beings. Well, in order to be free, you have to have an awakening. You have to eradicate mind control. So the belief in authority, bearing in mind all men are created equal. Well, if all men are created equal, but we believe in the authority of another man, well, that's mind control. That's not following the will of the Creator. So basically, an awakening has to occur where we come to self-actualization, and that's a product of it's something called unity consciousness, which is the alignment of thoughts, emotions, and actions in the appropriate measures. And how do you achieve that? You achieve that by the balance of the brain hemispheres between the male and the female aspects of the mind, the left and right brains, bringing them into unison so you can then understand, feel, and put out the correct responses to what's known as the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. So if you can reach self-actualization, well, that's what a spiritual awakening is. So I would encourage that in its truest form. We need a spiritual.
In its truest form, but what I think I was meaning, I didn't put it over there because you've only got limited space. That's my excuse. Is that I'm talking about a Glastonbury controlled opposition, sort of dream catcher and drum bashing and
You see, can I just mention that
hippie stuff, which is
and this is where the truth move. As I say, the truth movement. This is where a lot of people in general are going wrong. A lot of people think to be spiritual means that you're kind and gentle and considerate of everybody. No, you're not. It means you've got to sharpen a blinking pitchfork. And if government and the idiots who come down heavy acting in regards to government are giving you a hard time, you do some pitchfork actions. That's a self-defense principle. So these, no offense, I'm going to use the word pussies. The pussies who cut around festivals in flip-flops thinking they've got it all sussed are just combat ineffective buffoons who don't fully understand or appreciate the self-defense principle. No offense, but some of these people need to start doing.
I know what you mean, but
I think they need to get fit to fight. Sorry, Matt.
That's okay. I mean, my personal view, I'm not a violent person. I'm not. Not to say violent. No, you're not. I don't. None of us on here are violent people. We're all peaceful people. That's what we're aiming for. But I can see your point, yes. But I like the idea of the PEACE officers, peace officers, and these Hells Angels. That if an old lady's going to be booted out of her house, she gives a phone call, and our boys come along and tell the police to politely go away. And that's it. Just politely say, please go away. You're not wanted here. Shoo, 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 shoo. Off you go. And that's that's the sort of attitude we should have, as if they are dirt beneath us, because
these points
we
are worth
pay their wages.
Yeah, well, these points are worth kind of extracting a bit more meat on the bones of this, because I agree with you in principle, and even though I used to be a soldier, I don't class myself as a violent person no longer.
You're
When I was
not.
when I was a soldier, I was a violent person, but there is a distinction between violence and force, and I'll quickly mention that now. Violence is the initiation of force in order to harm or in order to extort or whatever you wish for your violent action. Force is repelling an aggressor. Repelling a violent aggressor is an act of force. An act of force is a self-defense principle. This is written into nature, and if we don't have the fighting spirit to repel aggression, to repel violence, then we will lose, because the people who use violence, cops, soldiers, government, they will just look at us like a bunch of scared little weeds, and they'll just destroy us, because if we don't fight back, they will see us. And again, this is very simple dynamics of human behavior. Oh, look, these are a bunch of cowardly custards. Let's go and kick sand in their face, because none of them got balls. So until the truth movement grow balls and they're willing to sharpen pitchforks or whatever that might be in order to repel to repel violence, then we will lose. And further to that, further to that, if we are thinking that it's only the job of the peace force, the peace constables, or the Hells Angels biker gangs, or whoever we use in order to mitigate or counter violent action, then we will also lose. We need to all be prepared to stand up and fight to some degree. I'm not saying everyone's going to be a boxer. I'm not even going to say it's going to enter the boxing ring. What I am going to say, though, in principle, if we are not prepared to repel violent action, then we may as well prepare to lose. That's how warfare works.
Can I make something very clear here, though?
Yeah.
This is self-protection, and in law, you have a right to protect yourself. If somebody is violent towards you, you have a right to defend yourself. And this is what we're talking about. I think we've got to make that really clear in case some arsehole sort of tries to make trouble for us.
I'm making
we've got to make that
massive
100% clear. I mean, we're not going to go out of our way. If somebody, let's put it this way. If someone comes into your house and they're armed, you have a right in law to defend yourself. And what you were showing, with your Sharpie pen and things like that, but not excessive. You just defend yourself. And if I saw a woman who was about to be raped or something like that, I would rush over, and I'm sure any man would rush over and try and defend and help that woman, because that is what men are meant to do, protect women, and that's it. But although, yes, I say I'd rush over, that sounds very ballsy, doesn't it? But I'd rush over. But it depends. If it's a gang about 20 blokes, bloody hell, But no, seriously, I think that the role of men has been pushed down by social engineering. With feminized, totally feminized. And I'm not. And what I meant by that, once upon a time, I'll give you an example. My mother, she during World War II would walk around, and remember it was full of American servicemen and British servicemen, and she was as safe as houses, because if a man would have put his finger on her, even touched her up, there would have been about 3 or 4 blokes saying, "Oh, are you okay, madam?" And they would have been set up. She would have been safe. That's it. And women were safe because they were gentlemen in those days who were real men, and that's it. And Mike Mantis said, men have been deliberately emasculated by social engineering. Now, Mark, what's your view, about the sharpened pitchforks and things like that, about defending yourself?
Yeah, absolutely agree again with what Steve has described there, and it goes back to your first, your tale about the person threatening to shoot somebody if
that's right, yeah,
trespassed on the land. So it's self-defense. This is you mentioned the actual, the man's law gives you the right to use reasonable force to defend yourself. And that is Obviously, if somebody is trespassing on your property, you have the right to use reasonable force. If at first they don't leave, you've asked them politely, and that force is reasonable for the situation that you find yourself in, and we're left to make that decision. My point here is that natural law, if you look at it carefully, it is enshrined into some of our man-made laws, especially criminal aspects of law, because ultimately natural law, it still is to a degree, but it was a philosophical idea about how to enshrine law into society. That's the very sort of exoteric, surface level version of natural law, whereas what we're talking about here is the occult or the hidden or the esoteric version of natural law, which is when you get to the real fundamentals of how nature actually operates. But yeah, if you actually study law, man-made law, you will see it enshrined, because they know on a deep level that this is true and that this is how society should be set up. So yeah, self-defense, the right to use reasonable force, violence, who initiated the violence. I mean, we've spoken about adults behaving like children. Even children know that it's the one who initiated it who is to blame. They started it. That is a truth. Whoever initiates the violence deserves the karmic consequences of how you are going to defend yourself using what's reasonable based on the circumstances. Even children know this. Unfortunately, even children are being taught not to use force to defend themselves. They're actually being taught this at school, where if a bully is, physically uses physical violence on another student, if that student uses force to defend themselves, they both get the same punishment. I've seen this happen.
That is disgusting. But apparently, now I'm no legal expert, but I've heard this. I won't say from where, but it's a group that looks at English law. Now, I'm not sure about Scotland, Wales, Ireland. This is English law. In England, we still have the right to bear arms. That's law. That we have the right to bear arms, similar to America. That we have. So I'm not sure about other places, but in England itself, because it's the English Constitution, apparently. Again, I can't say too much because I don't want to sound like a Barrett-Long liar, because I'm not that up in law and that. I mean, yeah, I had to study in commercial law, but that type of thing is a little bit different. And I went down I had to do it the establishment route, which tells you all the establishment crap, So, check out the student. This is Hachi. Hello, Hachi. Check out the student that got stabbed, then handcuffed, and bled out. Oh my God! Well, handcuffed. It's across the media. Oh no.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Going back to your point, Eric, if I may, just to quickly touch upon that, about the right to bear arms. So under natural law, and this is why it's also massively important to be established, especially by the truth movement, because we want to move in truth and we need to push truth forward. So the truth of the governance of the universe is natural law. Again, if people don't understand that, that's not my problem. They need to come into that knowledge to accept it and to assimilate that. But under natural law, no one has more rights than anybody else. So your rights are no different than mine. My rights are no different to Boris Johnson's, and Donald Trump has got no greater right than I have. It's as simple as that, because all men are created equal. That will never change. So if all men are created equal, well, all men and women, of course, have got the right to defend themselves. That's a fundamental human right, to defend yourself. Well, why is only certain groups who are government aligned have got this right. Why? Because we're under mind control, because we believe something called legislation and decrees, acts and statutes, which is all based on man's inventions in order to profit a ruling class. So in order to profit a ruling class, well, guess what? The legislation is always going to be leaning significantly towards their favour. So therefore, they've declared that the proletariat have not got the right to bear arms. That means we must be mind controlled to accept these terms, because in nature we've got the morally legitimate principle to employ self-defense. If we can't defend ourselves because they've taken that right away from us, well, we're either stupid or we are under mind control.
Yes, you got a good point. We do have that right, but really, how do you see? Supposing a genie came out of a bottle and made did magic wands, and how can you see the transition between what we've got, where people brainwashed to look for an idol in a government, and you have and why is it these politicians are always called old? Oh, Nigel, he'll get things sorted. Yeah, oh Nigel, and it's always old this and old that. No, they won't, because it's like, as I've said many times, it's like joining the mafia and thinking you can convert them all to Jehovah's Witnesses. No, it won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
How it stinks, it's rotten, it's corrupt, and to me, government is corruption. So how can we transition between this mentality? Because I'm wondering whether we would need neuro-linguistic programming to program people out of this kind of slave attitude where they're looking for a leader. How are we going to transition from what we've got now to non-government? How are we going to do it?
Watch the Cook Files.
I think, unfortunately, Eric, the answer to that question is one that most people don't want to hear, because ultimately it is spiritual warfare. It is a war of the mind. The vast majority of people are imbalanced to the side of selfishness, and as long as they're comfortable and as long as they have what they want, they don't see that there's any problem. If we can't convince the vast majority of people, certainly the majority of people, that there is a problem and that they are part of that problem, then nothing is going to change, and we can't expect government to just dissolve itself. It does start with every single individual at that individual level. And as far as Steve's spoken a bit about spiritualism there, and you put that question in the survey, Eric. I was able to answer two answers, by the way, Steve. I don't know if you tried that, but I did. But anyway, I avoided the spiritual answer because for the same reasons that I wasn't quite sure what you meant. I guessed that you meant the love, light, and laughter type of yes, exactly. So I didn't answer that question. I didn't use that answer. But
spiritual pen here. It's from, was it from Chief Wagadinga Plonka? Sorry, carry
on. But yeah, people don't seem to realize that true, what has been coined streetwise spirituality is defending yourself and using those self-defense rights and reasonable force. That is true spirituality. That is standing up for yourself and saying no. That is my daughter going to school and not wearing a mask. That is a true spiritual awakening. So Steve is right. A true spiritual awakening would be the start of the domino effect, but the first domino has to fall. The action has to happen in the physical world. But the way that I see the spiritual war, people talk about good and evil, but I think it's quite apt that you called the show The Sucking Force. I'm concentrating carefully when I say that. Because to me, the spiritual war is going on inside our heads. It's the mental realm. It's the if people think about what they want versus what they should, that's the struggle. You can want lots of things, but you've got to ask yourself, is this right? That's the intellect versus the emotions or the question of morality or wisdom. Should I do this? Is this right? Just because you want it doesn't mean that it's good or it's right. And that's the war that's going on inside every one of us. That's the the moral relativism comes from that force. It comes from that imbalance of what you want, regardless of anybody else. I want that. It's connected to the ego. It's connected to living purely in the material world, having no spiritual sort of element to balance out that sort of struggle inside of your head. And that is the the force which contracts. It consumes consciousness. It keeps us in a base level of consciousness. It keeps us in that sort of survival instinct, and we don't expand our awareness. And once we have that balance and expand our awareness, that's when we become aware of who we are. As the first question I put on the list was, who do we think we are? That's
Change
what
our
you would say.
frequency.
Yeah,
Change our
that's what
frequency.
exactly. That's what you would say to a person who has perceived authority. Who do you think you are? That's what you would say to your neighbor if they started bossing you about. Who do you think you are? But ultimately, who do you think you are? And that's the balance that's going on inside of people. They need to balance the want with the should, the intellect with the intuition, and come to a greater level of awareness of who they are. Once people realize who they are, then the mind control, the NLP, what are the tactics of mind control will just fade away. And once we all realize who we are, then we'll realize that why do we need a government? I can own my own
You're
thoughts
right.
and actions, and I can come to the right conclusions about what's right and wrong. I will have self-ownership. I won't be in internal opposition. So again, Steve mentioned about Satanism, which just means opposer. This is people who are in opposition within themselves. They're at war inside their heads. They're at, in opposition rather than in unity with themselves. How can a policeman brutalize a pregnant woman? They know that's wrong, Eric.
That's right.
I don't care what anybody says. They know deep down inside them, they know that that's wrong, and they're carrying out the order anyway. That's internal opposition. That is Satanism. But sorry, I've rambled on. To answer your question, that's how government will just fade away, because people will just come to the realization that we don't need it.
I think you're spot on. And also what Nikola Tesla said, and that is change our frequency. Now, I noticed something very, very odd. Some time ago, I went to a neighbour's funeral, and I sort of went there because I thought, well, neighbour. And when I left, I was wearing a whistle and float suit, and I thought, oh, on the way home, I'd do some shopping. So as I went into the supermarket, I noticed people treating me differently because I had a suit on. Now, just because I was wearing a suit, people were very different towards me. Isn't that odd? And it's like a uniform. People treat people in uniforms very differently to when they're not in a uniform. I mean, did you find that, Steve, when you were in the army? If you wore your uniform, people treated you differently when you were with amongst civvies?
They might have done to some degree. I mean, people were generally polite and friendly and
Yeah.
respectful, I would say, but I can't say massively, to be honest.
Hmm.
But I mean, it is a
Well,
definite thing. I
If
mean,
you wear
I
a suit,
will.
though, do you find that? Do you find if you wear a suit, people treat you a little bit, just a little bit
Yeah,
differently?
yeah.
Just notice it.
I mean, even though I absolutely detest what the police stand for, if I see a police officer walking down the street, I'll even say hello and be quite polite.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully, if there was, I had time and they had time, I would definitely, like to get into a conversation and say, listen, you ever thought about quitting your job? You're a immoral piece of human excrement, and how come you've got a taser and what you call it, a truncheon? By the way, I'm armed with a Sharpie. Let's have a fight. Yeah, well, obviously that last bit I'm joking. Not really, but but people in uniform definitely do usually gain some sort of respect, and to be honest, it's a psychological effect as well, because we're kind of geared from school age to treat the elders, the people with the teachers in the uniform, etc., with the authority, when really what we've done is we've lost our own authority. We need to be the authors of the direction in which our own lives are heading. And when scumbags in police or military uniform or government suits or taking ownership of that authority, then they are dictating the terms. And this is what spiritual awareness or awakening is about. So spirituality, somebody mentioned that in the chat. What is spirituality? Well, spirituality is essentially, as I said earlier, it's the alignment of unity consciousness, where thoughts, emotions, and actions become your own, because you realize objective morality. You realize that there's a distinction between right and wrong in nature, inherent into the laws of nature, and you abide by them by following that in three ways. So three, I'm going to mention that number because three is massively important. The Trinity, the Holy Trinity, people will be aware of. But thoughts, emotions, and actions, well, that's a Trinity. There's also an opposing Trinity. So ignorance, apathy, and cowardice, or what's known as the three traitors in the Freemasonic traditions. The three traitors that deny somebody the ability to gain a spiritual, a spiritual awakening. But there's also, on top of that, how do we operate in the world? We operate through another Trinity. We operate in three ways: thoughts, emotions, and actions. We need to have these things in balance at the right time in the right place. So thoughts, emotions, and actions. So, for example, if I was to put this, well, what on earth is this imbecile blabbering on about? Well, thoughts. A lot of people in the truth movement. Again, I'm pretty rude to the truth movement. That's because I want them to win. So I'm not going to blow smoke up their arse and tell them they're doing good when they're not. They need to do better effectively. So thoughts. A lot of people in the truth movement know that there's bad stuff happening. They'll know the various groups and secret societies, but what they don't, in fact, they'll up that even with emotions. So their emotions are on track. They know that this isn't right and we need to do something about it. The place where they're letting themselves down is the action phase, because we're still like running around like headless chickens, running what to do.
Yes.
And thinking that if we hold some yellow boards up at a roundabout, the world will wake up. No, you need to do something more than that. You need to know objective morality to know right from wrong. And this is I think this is a big stumbling block, because a lot of people who will claim to be spiritual or new age or were in the truth movement, they'll think, well, of course we know right from wrong. Yeah, duh. Well, okay then. Is government right? No, government's wrong. It's wrong on all fronts. And I put at the start of the chat, when Mark was on about the transgressions of natural law, there were 7 of them. Government will always transgress every element of natural law. All 7 of them, they will always transgress, because they have to apply force and coercion and theft in order to operate. Government will never, ever, in a billion years, ever be morally legitimate. Therefore, if we advocate for government, we will never become a moral species. And morality and freedom are, what's the word, are linked. If you don't have morality, you don't get freedom. If you're not moral, if you're not free, your society's not moral. So it needs to be morality. Morality leads to freedom. So again, it sounds a little bit complicated, but in a sense, it's very, very simple. We need better behavior, and we need to understand right from wrong. This is, I hate to say it took me 30 years of a blinking.
It took me a long time as well. Penny to drop. It does. And I think, why did it take so long? But I think it's like a training period. But I mean, I had a girlfriend who was an anthropologist, and she said that when you look at tribes, the ones that have got a chief and ranks are the most aggressive of the lot and the most unhappiest. The ones that haven't got a chief, the most happiest. They go out and they do some hunting in the morning, and then they come back and, got the rest of the day to whatever they want to do. And they're generally the most peaceful. It's the ones that got a hierarchy, like we got with government, that are the most aggressive. But in chat, they're talking about a troll. I think he's gone now, isn't he? I don't know. There's some geezer earlier, or woman, I don't know who it was. But as a troll back again, because, Mike Mantis says troll is back. Is he?
Who is it?
Don't know. We had some funny things in. You see, when you get funny things in chat, you're over the target. So there we go. Now this is a good one by some geezer called Six Blade. Oh yes, 3 things prevent spiritual growth: ignorance. We
That's
also
basically
operate in
just
3
explain.
planes: thoughts, emotions, and actions. Now, you got excellent points there. Now, Mark, do you find though that, have you been associated with any truth groups at all, or anything like that, or have you, like me? I try and keep away from groups, but I felt so isolated during the lockdown that I felt I needed to speak to somebody because I felt like a what's that film now? Where that bloke is the only one left alive on Earth, or what's it called? Something Man. Oh crumbs. Oh, what was it? Omega Man. That was it. Omega Man. Do you remember that film?
No, not familiar.
No,
but yes,
he's the only one. There's a virus that went around the world, and he thinks he's the only one, but he isn't. And he's seen driving along this road, and it's empty. And he goes into a car showroom, and he thinks, I think I'll have that one, and just drives straight through the plate glass window with it. But he's armed to the teeth, just in case. But anyway, you're going to say, Mark, sorry.
Yeah, pretty much the same as you. As I mentioned at the start of the introduction, that I was pretty much a normie before 2020, although I did have a sense of something wasn't quite right. And I definitely always had a sense of morality, but naively thought that everybody thought like me. That was part of the painful realization. But yeah, when 2020 happened, I got involved with the Stand in the Park for pretty much exactly the reasons that you described there, Eric. The complete, feeling of isolation, going insane, thinking that you're the only person out there who actually is on this wavelength, which was obviously part of the manipulation tactics. So yeah, Stand in the Park, which is where I came across Steve for the first time, actually. And I did, at the one that I would attend, I did meet some very, very genuine people, people that I've since lost contact with, because the Stand in the Park was quite a distance away. But yes, I became very, very acutely aware of the somewhat cult mentality of some of the people, and especially the New Age kind of mentality. Even though I couldn't describe it, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, now I understand. but I just had this sense that something's not right with these
Yes.
people. They don't realize the severity of the situation that we're actually in, and they think that, you know, just you can imagine flowers and rainbows and love your
That's,
way out of this situation.
I think they
But
were being
yes,
controlled.
yeah,
Controlled
I
opposition.
am. Very,
Sorry.
no, it's fine. I am very, very much a individual. I don't like groups. I don't like being part of anything
Nor do I.
unless it is categorically, you know, true. Something like natural law and morality, because it is demonstrable that this exists, and you can use reason and logic to convey it. So I would say that I'm a part of that group of people who are trying to learn and educate on these principles. But other than that, no, I don't want to be associated with any groups, and I found it somewhat. It did me good for that moment, but I soon
Learned a lot.
detached myself from it, and that really just happened
We're
naturally.
just saying, I'm terribly sorry to cut in there. We're saying goodbye to Food for Thought Radio now. So this will go on for a little while. We'll still be carrying on YouTube and Rumble, etc.
Accomplished fellow. He's the leader of the village choir, and his voice is warm and mellow. He drives a fruit cart around the street, and everybody knows it. He doesn't sing or rave about his fruit, he simply blows it. He's doing it all day long. It's better than any song. Though it isn't very pretty, you've got to admit it's cute. So all together let it go. Eat more fruit.
You have been listening to Fockham Hall with Eric Von Essex. Remember, whatever you do, have a bloody good laugh.
Thank you very much, and good night to Food for Thought Radio.
1, 2, 3. Cluck, cluck. Wake up your mind. Fill up your day. Oink, oink, oink. Smart little bites that brighten your way. You're listening to Food for Thought Radio here at FFTradio.com. Food for Thought Radio here at FFTradio.com.
That's it. Thank you very much. That always catches me. I always forget that last bit. But we said good night to Food for Thought Radio. We're still carrying on YouTube, Rumble, I think Telegram, Facebook, Holy Land Radio and Holy Land Radio FM. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, rather, everybody in Wisconsin who's listening to Holy Land Radio FM in their motor cars. So there we go. But sorry, no. What you were saying is, I mean, what I found is you're right. It develops into a cult because someone assumes leadership. And when you look at how good the Yellow Vests were, they didn't have leaders. And I think the reason it worked is because most of the Yellow Vests, they were French farmers. And to be a farmer, you have to think for yourself. You have to make decisions. And it was really effective until the French government infiltrated it and put a leader in it and started their, their goofy, bloody leadership ideas. And that's the problem. You get someone on an ego trip that says, because I think, yes, you need people who have got skills that you follow who will help. Yes. I mean, for example, in a war situation, we would lean on Steve because he's trained in soldiering, so we'd lean on you, mate, wouldn't we? Shot off.
I'm useless without a gun.
Well, I don't know, but no, we would lean on you because it would assume because you have that knowledge or survival. I mean, we'd be standing there with a tin saying, "Oh, I don't know, I'm going to go hungry. We're going to eat." Need a bleeding tin opener. Yeah, things like that. No, I'm only joking. But what I mean to say, people, they're guides. I mean, when you look at it, when we were hunter gatherers, people worked as a team, but there was no real leadership as such. It was the elders that made the decisions. Look at the what's that group of people? The Amish in America. They don't have leadership as such. It's the religion that keeps them, the glue or the mortar that keeps them together, but it's the elders that make the decisions. Nobody votes for anything like that because they're wise. And this is the trouble with our society. We don't listen to the elders. We put them in old age pensioners' homes, granny dumps, and forget about them. And that's it. Where when you look at these Amazon tribes and people like that, they're put in great regard, and they're the peacemakers. If there's a war between two tribes or a disagreement between two tribes, it's generally the elderly women that make the peace, and they are respected. They won't be touched by either side. That time there is that sort of respect which we've lost in our culture, and this is the trouble. It's because we've got this tribalism, which is a pyramid tribalism, which I think is the most dangerous of the bloody lot. So that's my 10 pence worths. And Matilda said some African tribes have elders that make decisions. That's right. Same with Amazon tribes. A lot of them do as well. The elders make the decisions, or the youngers ask the elders for their wisdom, and they're respected for that. But now, I mean, I think that social engineering has got a lot to answer for, and that is what screwed things up in a big way. I really do think that. But do you think things might happen naturally? The government might just literally disappear, as Dave Starbuck once said, overnight, like a house of cards? Could it happen?
Can I answer that? I mean,
certainly, far away.
Ultimately, government will not disappear unless, of course, there's some mass awakening where people become, and again, that I know there's different connotations to the spiritual awakening bit, but the bit I advocate for is people coming into alignment with natural law, because as you mentioned tribes in the Amazon, you mentioned the Amish people who are closer aligned to nature. Therefore, their society works and flourishes more successfully, or certainly more peacefully than ours does, because they probably don't use eugenics as one of their leading ideologies, unlike our society, which is not just using it's used it. The eugenics bit's already happened, so they've already. I mean, if anyone's familiar with what's known as the 10 stages of genocide, have a look that up. I mean, my estimation is that we are at stage 5, teetering into stage 6. Stage 5 is organization. Again, please look into this in more detail. Organization for what? Organization to achieve polarization. Polarization is pretty much what happened on Saturday, where there was some protest and anti-protest going on in London.
Yes.
This is all part of polarization. So you've got the Dumbos waving the Union Jacks or the England flags, and you've got the Dumbos waving whatever. I can't even remember what the other protest was about, to be honest, because protests, if people are still trapped in protest mode, they're effectively, I hate to say, I'm just going to use the word dumb. You need to stop being dumb, stop being played for fools, stop falling into the traps. This is polarization. This is divide and conquer. Protest is never going to win. All you're going to win is your enslavement. That's it, because you've already failed to align your thoughts, emotions, and actions to your self-actualization, because you've already deemed and declared that the government is your Lord and Master. So when, again, the government are Satanists, ideologically leaning Satanists, therefore, if you believe that ideological Satanists are your lords and masters, well, that makes you a Dumbo. All right, that's a technical term, right? Dumbo. All right. By the way, I live in the Northeast. If anyone wants to challenge me on any of my use of words. Yeah, I live in the northeast. I'm quite happy to debate these points in further detail.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, Aunt Sally's brought something up very interesting here. A large proportion of our elders are sickly with big pharma interventions and effects of a lifetime of crap food, drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. And you're spot on there, Aunt Sally. But the thing that it gets me is that you know, what is it about these sort of every election people go along and they vote and they think it's going to make a change. What is that behaviour? And also when they protest, yeah, I mean, I saw a protest on the YouTube, and just I only saw a few moments of it, and someone shouts out "freedom," and the rest, everybody else does the same. Freedom. Like, I'm thinking, these people are supposed to be adults. What is wrong with them? I mean, I think in Turkey they came up with a brilliant idea. They did a protest where they stood outside the Parliament building and didn't say a word, just remained silent. But the best one was in, I think it was Norway, where there was this minister that nobody liked. So they made a doll with a kind of face of that minister and hung it up underneath a lamppost, upside down, like they did with Mussolini. And it was very effective because it was an overcast day. And it really, so as the government ministers looks out their window, they saw this lamppost with his body swinging upside down. Well, I think that's a classic. It really is. Do you think how powerful that is? That is psychological.
They're all well and good, but none of these things, even though, I mean, I criticise protests. I've been on loads of protests, knowing fine well that that's never going to be the answer to the solution that we want. It's good for a lot of things. Early on during the COVID pantomime, it was good to be able to have a public-facing body of people who could warn off the entrapped inhabitants of Clown World who didn't have a clue what was going on, and to maybe embellish them with some hard-hitting facts. Sadly, I don't think it even had an impact on a great many of them, most of whom were too massively brainwashed and traumatized psychologically to ever be able in a position to cognitively understand the harmful effects that government was doing right before their very eyes. But Yellow Vests, they might have had some limited success, but it fell flat.
They're infiltrated by the government. That's why it fell flat.
Infiltrated or not, I mean, even if that might be 100% the case, but if they were all in unity consciousness because their thoughts, emotions, and actions aligned with the truth of things like natural law and morality, then that wouldn't happen. Because I mean, for me, it sounds like I'm arrogant or full of myself.
No,
I cannot go back to my dream state when I used to be a combat infantry soldier. I can't go back there because I know that it's immorally corrupt. And I also know that government is an evil entity that aligns with Satanism. The only way I can do that is if I'm forced at gunpoint. And even then, I'm probably going to fight to the death. So I can't go back there. And it's the same with if the rest of the human population. And I'm not saying everyone's going to suddenly become spiritually enlightened, it's, overnight, but it's possible. And somebody mentioned in chat earlier that it's too late, there's no going back now. Well, I disagree. We can change the tide around because there is a law in nature which states how the universe functions, natural law. It even states the law of freedom. When morality increases, freedom increases. So if we want more freedom, all we have to do is garner more morality in our society. The easiest way to do that is to show them that government is evil, and supporting the government by advocating and paying tax and all the rest of it is an act of evil. If you want to be evil, crack on. If you want freedom, stop being evil. And then the universe will, by the natural order of things, garner the state of freedom in a whatever period of time that is. So it is achievable.
Yes. Actually, in chat tonight, we've certainly got quite a varied number. We've now got Russian language in the chat. I'm not going to bother to put it up, quite honestly. I think someone's taking the piss, to be straight with you. I think that was just a bit of a time waster. I mean, whatever that gobbledygoof was, if it meant something to somebody, I just hope it isn't rude. Now, what do we got here? Now, Unite the Kingdom, mostly funded by. Well, that's the thing. It's money, isn't it? It's so corrupt. But you know, I actually think that you never know. Something might happen that we least expect, which will get the bastards out.
Well, I would. Do you know what I would realistically expect? Again, and I'm just using warfighting doctrine here. So I've produced presentations on what I would call the battle picture, i.e., an assessment of world affairs and likely scenarios. Something called the most dangerous and the most likely course of action. Well, one thing is. I'm trying to put this in terms that might not, create problems on YouTube, but a bunch of people who come from somewhere else suddenly find themselves armed with things that go bang and things that are sharp, going running amok, claiming it's God's will, or words to that effect. Now that's a likely scenario.
Yes, I think we read between the lines. Yeah, so we can read between the lines. Something almost happened in the 1970s, where there was sort of ex-World War II veterans who were in their 60s and 50s and 60s in that era, and they started forming their own militia, sort of thing, where they said, because we had a lot of trouble with the unions apparently in the 1970s, where they would run essential services because the country was just literally falling to bits, as it is now. And it always has been falling to bits. That's the way countries are run. But I think that a lot of people are aware of what's going on. And I think that lockdown, my granddad always said there's always a bit of good comes out of bad. And that lockdown, a bit of good that came out of that, more people are asking questions. And the one that has really made me wonder, this U-turn on the climate. What's happened? I find that a bit weird, don't you? There's a U-turn on all this climate crap because they're saying it's a load of nonsense now. So
who's saying that, Eric?
Yeah, well, apparently, I think it's not the United Nations. One of them has said that, in the words to effect, that the global warming is a load of nonsense, and it's all a pack of lies. An establishment is looking, so something weird. I don't know what is going on. Don't ask me what, but I saw that today. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I saw it on Telegram. So,
I mean, if I can quickly cut in there, I mean, the old world order has to go. So using the principles, solvet coagula, ordo ab chaos, this is breakdown and reform. Again, these are interesting dynamics because reform is now the political party, which is a load of people are now, oh yes, we need to do the reform and restore or whatever. Why? Because the other political movements have now shown their true colours. So now what we need to do is install another imbecile who'll entice and entrap a load of other dumbos into following his particular.
Another lot of Paul Anchors. I think that's a bit of Cockney, Cockney rhyming slang there.
Exactly. And
yes.
If anyone, again, if people are offended by that, sorry, but that's the case. I use the term dumbos because the other words I've got are far too rude for this channel. So I'm trying to remain dignified. Sorry, dumbos, but Rupert Lowe is not the answer because Rupert Lowe is still the government and the government are still scum. They're still evil scum. They'll still employ Satanism. So will Rupert Lowe. It's no different. It's
follow the money trail. Sorry, I didn't mean to call.
Oh no worries. Sorry, I'm on a rant.
Follow the money trail. That's the usual one. Follow the money trail and see who's financing. then you find out what their policies are. You see, that's
Well,
that's
do
how
you,
it works.
do you know what? That's a great principle, but
Yeah.
really, if we know that the government is evil because they employ the ideological tenets of Satanism as their operating procedure, well, it doesn't even matter if if the money's gifted from they're pulled out of the ground. It doesn't matter where the money comes from if you know that their product is evil. What it means is if you know it's evil and you're still following it, that makes you an advocate for evil, which is not really a good idea. So
That's
if you
right.
want a world without chaos and enslavement, stop being an advocate for evil. That's the easiest
You're spot
method.
on. You're spot on. And over to you, Mark. I mean, yeah, have you seen this Rupert Lowe and things like? Do you just? I just emotionally switch off. I just think there. I couldn't give a shit what Rupert Lowe has to say, because what they do is the same what all MPs do: tell people what they want to hear. This is what Tony Blair did, and get into power, and then do the complete opposite. I mean, look at Trump. You know, the lot of them. It's just a load of bullshit. They're bullshit artists. And Alice Gorgeous has said, the revolution will not be televised, but it will be infiltrated. Spot on. Yes. 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 That's it.
Yeah, the Rupert Lowe situation, absolutely agree, Eric. You might be saying some things that people want to hear, but why do people continue to trust? Why do people continue to effectively vote for which parents they want by putting an X in a box, like a traumatized child in a court, in a family court? That's what it's like. It really is. Once you see it for what it is, it's really hard to even tune in.
That's right. It's hard not to see it.
Yeah, even things like social media. You know, I have a dabble every now and again just to see where people are at, and it's never an enjoyable experience, especially with this whole reform. And I absolutely agree with Steve on the terminology. This is not an accident. I'm not saying at what level it's kind of planned or what have you, even if it's just a synchronicity of you know, reality actually trying to tell us something. This is definitely the destruction of the old system. That's the way I see it, and until I'm proven otherwise, I'll continue to see it that way. And even just on a superficial level, you just look at who's in the party. There's Zahawi. Of people forgetting what he's done. You know, Anton LaVey, as I used to call him. And then I just learned recently, I can't remember his name, but he was basically, remember the McCanns? Well, how can you forget?
Oh, yes. But I'll tell you something, crap acting, wasn't it, what they did? There was real crap acting. You know.
So I can't remember the guy's name, but he was basically talking. Obviously, we started talking about propaganda. He was the McCann's propagandist. I can't remember his name, but he's in Reform as well. His name.
I can't think of his name. I know what you mean.
And you just think, well, it's just the old crowd, isn't it? You know,
it is. It's just all sort of refurbished. I'll tell you the other one, the word that they keep saying, and Nigel Farage is always saying this. This is the change we need. Yes, we've got to change. Yes, it must change. I feel like if I see him, I get to say, yeah, mate, look, there's a couple of pence here for your change. I mean, what the bloody hell? And who's that other Obama? He won on the election. Well, he kept saying, we are the change that is needed. Yes, definitely the change. It's bullshit. And I always remember when I was a kid, because we weren't very rich, we was quite poor. We had a flickering black and white television, and you had to do gymnastics with the aerial to get the right signal. We said, go back a bit. And you would see these po-faced politicians go, miserable sods. And I thought that everybody had done something wrong and we had to be punished for it, you know. And they've always been miserable sods. And the fact is, I think what Sam has said, which is a good one, people voting, it's Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, it's like a defense mechanism, self-defense mechanism in the mind, isn't it? And the other thing I was just sort of thinking about when I think I can't remember how you put it, Eric, but we keep doing the same thing again, don't we? We keep voting. Why do we keep voting?
That's
Why
right.
do we not learn? Isn't that the definition of insanity?
That's right.
But why don't we learn? Well, you're meant to learn from history, aren't you? That's what they say. So we've just to go back to the kind of esoteric stuff. The same force which is kind of controlling people, which is that sort of selfish force controlling, very wanting, never asking, should, lacks wisdom, lacks morality. That's that psychological force, that imbalance in the brain, which Steve has mentioned, that doesn't look back. That's a psychological fact. If you're imbalanced to that side, and that's the sort of where you lean, you don't look back, you don't self-reflect, and you don't learn from your mistakes. And that is the sucking force. That's the force that's sucking the life out of us at the minute. And it doesn't want to learn. It can't admit that it's wrong, and it certainly can't admit that there's a problem that they're part of. But that's why we don't learn. That's the kind of the best way I can put it, from that sort of esoteric level of wisdom, if you like.
I know what you mean.
These
Yeah.
people
Excellent.
can't look back.
They think for the moment. I mean, I've had quite a bit of experience because, I mean, I'm not religious, but I do believe in demons because my family were demonically attacked, and I've actually seen someone that is demonically possessed, and it's quite frightening when you see two personalities going bang, 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 bang. I won't go into that. And I actually do believe there is a lot of demonic stuff going on in government. I think it's run by demons. But I've got a question for you from Asperger's as Fudge. Isn't that a lovely name for our cultural attaché? Asperger's as such, our Fockham cultural attaché. Because I guess you know about Fockham Hall. This is because I've declared independence, you see. I live in a separate country from the United Kingdom. I live in Fockham Hall. And question for Steve: do you support any form of leadership? ID, assume in a survival workshop you take leadership.
So yes, leadership. There's nothing wrong with leadership. The human society functions with leadership. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. So yes, I agree with it. What I don't agree with is leadership out of control, which is known as authority. So as I said, to break down that word very slightly, to be the author of one's own destiny. Well, ultimately, a good leader would always encourage autonomy. It would always encourage let's just say the underlings to establish themselves, to learn, to grow, to adapt, and to become self-governant, to become leaders of their own, or authors of their own destiny, to become leaders themselves. Nothing wrong with leadership, but that doesn't mean that we should fall for the government, what would I say leadership in inverted commas. They're not leaders, they're dictators forcing us through mind control, coercion. Yeah. and this is where we need more leaders in society who can lead the rest of people to come to their own, to become authors of their own destiny, to become autonomous, to gain liberty, to understand what freedom actually is, to understand what rights are, to understand that they own their own bodies and they should also own their own minds. Government will never do that. So, brilliant point, Asperger's.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up. And I look on it, for example, imagine there's people like myself. No, not myself. There's a group that need to go across some harsh territory, okay? They haven't got a bleeding clue on survival. And you've got Survival Steve and two politicians, very skilled politicians, who know absolutely all about survival. Okay, they might have got a book on the SAS Survival Guide, and that's about it. That's all they know. They probably even read that, but they use bullshit. So people would vote for the bullshitter, who will then lead them into the desert, and none would survive. Okay, and that is how the system works. Whereas the natural leader shines. So you'd stand at the side of the desert, a whole group of people, and Steve would shine because of his knowledge, and you'd survive. But a politician would say, well, yes, just go this way and things will be much better tomorrow. Yes, no, don't die of thirst. We'll be a lot better tomorrow. Just pay me some money and I might go down the shop and buy some liquid. Oh, there's no shops around here. We're in the bleeding desert. You know, that's the way it would work. You know? But that's sort of an analogy. The politicians would win the vote to lead people into the desert because they're brilliant bullshitters, but they don't know. I mean, what makes me laugh is have a government and they put someone in charge of a department that knows absolutely sod all about the subject. Like, Minister of Health. Have you seen the Belgian Minister of Health? She's a beast.
I've seen the European, the health ministers. It's like the biggest the biggest freak show ever.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
You know, that should be a good advertisement for what government's all about.
Well, that's it. But I think that I think what it is that when you look at governments, they are criminal. Without a shadow of doubt, they're criminal. And tax is theft. You can call it a fancy name, you can call it anything you want, but it is theft. And I don't know I guess you know G. Edward Griffin, and I'm bloody envious of John Hamer. He went and had lunch with him, cheeky sod. Seriously, yeah, I'm bloody envious of that. But no, he said that, he's in his 80s when he met him, and he's bounding along as if he's in his 30s, But G. Edward Griffin, he says if there's a task to be done, if you order someone to do that task, they'll do it with a heavy heart. But if you people do it of their own volition, they won't, and you get a far better job. And that's it, basically. And anyway, I think we're coming near the end of the show. I don't know about you. I need to hit the hay, as they say. I'm feeling a bit.
Happy days.
I was up about 5 this morning. I don't know why I wake up at 5. So before we go, any sort of words you'd like to say to the chat, and also our strange people we've had this evening, writing in all different languages. Can we have someone in writing in the East Mongolian what do you call it, weird script or something? So just to end it off, But Steve or
can I plug a couple of things and
please do.
Before Mark,
good plug, yeah.
Right, so the Occult Academy on Telegram, big awake. Read that. I would also encourage, in fact, I'm going to this is a giveaway. I don't know how this is going to work. I would highly recommend anyone watching, anyone who's interested to know why government is the most dangerous superstition, to read this book. It's not horrendously big. It's by Larkin Rose, or you can get an audio file on YouTube, etc. Or I'll happily give this away free to somebody. I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm quite happy to send that out for free if anyone's interested. Join the Occult Academy. Just put your hands up or whatever you need. I would also encourage people to read a 97-page booklet. Again, it's a PDF. You can't buy this anywhere. It's like impossible. It's rockin' horse shit. It's it's The End of All Evil by Jared. Oh, you've got it. How have you got that?
Bloody hell.
They cost thousands.
It's a PDF.
They go for like £1,000 a hard copy, which are like impossible to get. It's very short. That'll change your life if you've not read it. The third thing I would also recommend is the Mark Passio Natural Law Seminar. It's about 8 hours long, but it's well worth it. Trust me, it'll change your life. That's it from me. Thank you.
Excellent. And have you got anything to plug, mate? Mark, you got your Coop files on YouTube, and
that's it. That's it for me. Yeah. My channel, the Coop Files, obviously is available on YouTube and on Rumble if you have a preference. Other than that, I would just absolutely agree with Steve there on his recommendations, and obviously there's a lot more that I could recommend in terms of plugging other people's material. But yeah, that's a good enough place to start.
And
So thank you.
That's okay, because now Steve is our defence minister. Because you've I don't know if you heard about Fockham Hall, the country that, you know, I am I'm Lord Fockham of the Fockham Hall, and people can have fancy titles. We've got Patrick and Wisconsin, America. He's the last Zulu outpost and ambassador for cheese. So I don't know if you really want to have a Ponzi title. You can be anything you want, because we do like bullshit titles around here. You know, we've got cultural attaches, because and things like that. Because why not take the piss out of the establishment? So if you want to be, was it a cultural attaché to I don't know, up north, ambassador of the Coop Files, and we could say it's clucking good.
It's excellent.
Oh, that's yes. You've cracked one there, but but chickens, they're vicious little bastards. If one gets a bit injured, they pick the other one, don't they? That's why they call it the pecking order. They really are. They're not, you know, you think of chickens all being nice and lovely and peace and love. No, they're bleeding aggressive bastards.
Yeah, I do ironically have chickens. That's not why I called it the chicken coop. That goes back a long time, that name. But anyway, yeah, I do actually have hens,
Really?
and you're right, they are vicious. I found it quite just stressful, actually, the abuse and the you know, the physical abuse that they enact on each other within the hierarchy. It's it really is like watching humanity.
And unlike dogs, you're not head of the pack. You're just the person that feeds them. You know, they don't sort of look up to you like a dog will look up to you, or a cat. Well, I don't know, cats don't they? Because between you and I, cats secretly rule the world, but they haven't told us. That's the truth. Cats do. And because, you know, cats sort of, you can stroke me if you want. And you notice when you stroke a cat, they lick the human off of them. Have you noticed that? Give a cat a stroke, and afterwards he goes, bloody human. every time they do that, you know. But anyway, please look. Are you on there? Do you go live or record?
Just record at the moment. Yeah, it takes me quite a while to put my presentations together. And
I've seen today. I've seen one, your last one. Very interesting, nicely put together, very professional, excellent.
Thank you.
You know?
I do think I'm in a very odd place. I'm way out of my comfort zone. This is not what I want to be doing, but as I said at the top, have a sense, you know, of obligation, and I'm just trying my best. And I think each one is better than the last, and I think that's what we have to strive for. That each day is better than yesterday. But yeah, they do take a while to put together, and I just go off on tangents. So not necessarily tangents, but these topics are so deep that you think you can cover it in half an hour, and quite frankly, you can't cover it in half an hour. There was one presentation where what I thought was the intro went on 5.5 hours. And that's one episode.
Well, I'm a bit like that with modern history and World War II, because both my parents had shell shock, so I heard World War II every day of my life from an early age. So, you know, you start me off a bit like a diesel engine, just and you get me and Monica together. Monica Schaefer, her father was born the same year as my father, and he was in the German army. Well, he's a medic in the German army, and my dad was in the frontline intelligence in the British Army. So, and they're both, I'm not sure about her father, but my dad was a very reluctant conscript, and that's why he's very rebellious. A very peaceful man, very placid, but he really rebelled. He really disliked. He said it was a war that should never have happened. You know, and it's like all wars, all fought for. All wars are fought by forgotten heroes for lost causes. I mean, who gives a shit who died in Vietnam? Seriously, That war went on as longest America's ever been involved in a war. Who gives us? What about Falklands? The amount of people that died in the Falklands. Do people care? There's a graves, and coming up to modern standards days, who cares about the people that are being killed in Iran, Israel, and American forces as well? But I think there's a bit of a rebellion going on in their forces. It seems to be, isn't there? So there's a bit of rebellion in the ranks. You never know. But no, as I always say, I'm on the side of the innocent person, regardless of who they are. And when I see bombs raining down on innocent people, that really upsets me because it's going to affect the children and everybody. Gaza, horrendous. Anyway, on that note, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm usually a guest on Paul English's show on Paul English Live on Rumble on Thursdays at 8 o'clock UK time. And of course, we'll be back next Sunday at the same time and next Monday. And I think you're booked in for next week, aren't you, Steve?
Me? What day?
Yeah. Hang on a minute. I got my piece of paper. You see, I'm very modern. I use an old-fashioned diary. And
I like a diary, mate. Yeah, what we're going to talk about next time. You got
we might do. It's up to you, mate. You might do a bit of survival stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, I know. The last time we talked. Sorry, mate.
That's all right. Carry on, mate. Whilst I'm looking for me piece of paper.
I think the last time it's all right, mate. I'll check on my diary. But the last time I think we're talking about survival. I think we're talking about everything but survival. So I'm quite happy, mate. If it's about running amok and causing the nuisance with the cops, yeah, I'm up for that.
I've got it. I put it in the back of my diary so I wouldn't lose it. And I looked everywhere but the back of my diary. So, yes, this is typical me, yes. Right, here we go. Who's coming up? Right, what's it next week? It's, what's it today? 19th. We got Sunday the 25th. That's empty. Hang on a minute. I've got the wrong one. I'll sod it. We'll sort it out later. There's something gone wrong here. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it anyway. It's it'd be nice to see some of the comments in chat again because there's some bright people on this group. And I'm glad everyone's an anarchist. So it's tip top. I'm going to drink to that. Yeah.
I'll drink to that as well. And thank you very much. I'm sorry. I've actually had a downloading problem with my diary. I'm sorry about that. I think it's dropped out on the floor somewhere. But thank you very much for joining us, everybody. And again, please join us next week, or also on the Paul English show. This is 8 o'clock. Paul English Live on Rumble, YouTube, and Uncle Tom Goblin and Food for Thought Radio as well. And put your thumbs up and please subscribe. And thank you for everybody who's bought me a coffee. It's much appreciated. It really is. And remember, my website is down. Lots of people have been emailing me saying, do you know your website's down? Yeah, no, because the server, I don't know, it's gone tits up. So we're sorting that out at the moment. So it might be a couple of days. And whatever happens, have a bloody good laugh and good night.